Good morning, everybody. All two of you that are listening. Hopefully the show grows a little bit more. But welcome back to Actually Sports. I'm your host, Griffin. I probably sound a little less enthused than I did last week, but that's because I have been sick since Wednesday with an unnamed illness. Yeah, completely unnamed. And it is Saturday morning, and I am just finally up to snuff to record something for you guys. But I thought week one went pretty well for the show. I'm going to try to keep things a little bit shorter because I don't have as much energy. And also it's kind of difficult for me to talk right now. So it's going to be a little bit shorter of a week. Sorry for that, you guys, but I really am feeling it. But to start things off, last week was an amazing week for the NFL. Amazing finale. And honestly, I think that this is one of the most chaotic seasons the NFL has ever had. A lot of people were saying that last week was going to be that, or not last week, last season was going to go down as one of the most chaotic because of all the illness. I don't want to say the actual word because then YouTube's going to be on my butt. But, you know, all the stuff, quote unquote, that was going on last year. But this year has honestly been a dream for people who love chaos in the NFL. Like, I know Derek, he loves it when there is nonsense occurring in the league, and there definitely was a lot of that this year, especially in the regular season finale. But last week, real quick, I managed to go 12-4 on the predictions. I also realized that I forgot to cover the New Orleans versus Atlanta game last week. I am so sorry, Ryan. Because he's going to be the co-host for this show. Only reason he's not here is because obviously I have a specific illness, so he's not here. But he's actually a Falcons fan, and I managed to somehow skip his favorite team's regular season finale. I don't know how I did that, but I did have the Saints winning that game in my predictions that I had on paper. And I don't really need to recap that game because it didn't matter what happened. New Orleans wasn't going to make the playoffs because San Francisco won. But good on the Saints for wrapping up the season with a win against a division opponent. And also, good job on the Falcons for the season they had. Honestly, I wasn't expecting them to get as many wins as they did. And that may have been Matt Ryan's finale with Atlanta, but we're going to get into all the offseason stuff next week with Ryan because I think that all of the different storylines going on with the offseason and coaches and things like that, that really needs to be discussed with the co-host for this show, Ryan, and he will be here next week. Sorry if my voice cracks and all that stuff. Like I said, I've been sick. But we're not going to talk much about the off-season options and issues, like head coaching vacancies, players going to different places, trade scenarios. We're not really going to talk about that very much this week. We're going to save that for when the co-host is here and the show is actually at 100%. But it is awesome that I went 12-4. I had some really good predictions, and I think that might mean that I know what I'm talking about with the NFL. Maybe. I don't know. Or maybe I just know how to predict chaos because that's what this season was. But let's talk about three big things from last week very quickly because we want to keep the show a little bit shorter. What in the world happened with Brian Flores? I think it's ironic because I was partially right last week when I said that Tua was playing for his job because the Dolphins beat the Patriots, which doesn't surprise many NFL fans because Miami somehow manages to steal one from New England every single year. But that was actually a pretty convincing win, and Tua did exactly what he needed to do. He needed to show that he can win a game for Miami and at least not lose one. He did that. And in last week's episode, I actually said that, Brian Flores, that his job was completely safe. Apparently I was wrong, but as reports have come out talking about the situation, it's apparent that the organization chose Tua over Brian Flores, apparently due to issues with team morale and chemistry and his apparent desire to have drafted Justin Herbert instead of Tua. And even though he would have been right about that, that doesn't mean that he needs to ignore Tua's development, which is what he apparently has done. So he's out. And I don't know who Miami is going to hire, actually. I think that is a really huge blow to their chemistry and their development as a team, because he was a defensive genius, and that won them a lot of games in his tenure. The only reason that they were on the cusp of the playoffs the past 2 seasons was because of the defense. So whoever comes into Miami is going to have to be okay with Tua, because I think that the ownership and management has decided that they're going to give Tua at least 1 more year, meaning that don't hold out hope for Deshaun Watson going to Miami. I don't think it's going to happen. But man, Brian Flores, I feel like that is someone who he's going to be a head coach somewhere else. I think he will be a head coach somewhere else. But that's kind of going into the offseason stuff that we're going to talk about more with Ryan. But that was the number one big thing of this last week. Brian Flores getting fired took everyone by surprise. Now, number 3. I'm going to go over number 2 last, because it's actually something that is a lot of fun for me to talk about. But number 3, the Lions beat the Packers. That was one of my losses in the predictions, and it doesn't really surprise me, but I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about, because the Packers lost that game. The Packers starters lost that game because at halftime the Lions were beating the Packers. That should not have happened. Like, if you had told me that the Lions beat the Packers, I would have said, oh, okay, so the game was tied or the Packers were winning at halftime and then the Lions came back. No. The Lions beat the Packers with Aaron Rodgers starting in the first half. That's a really big deal, and I think that's an awesome way for the Lions to end the season, because if you want to talk about a team that plays for their coach, I don't think there's any other team in the league that plays harder for their coach except the Detroit Lions. And a lot of people have talked about Coach Campbell and how much his players love him and play for him and just leave everything on the field every single week. And I agree with that, because the Lions are about 5 possessions away from having 5 more wins on the season. And with how atrocious that organization was with Coach Campbell coming into this, I think it's a really impressive way to end the year. You beat a division rival in the Packers, and not just a division rival, but arguably the best team in the league this year. Now, I'm going to leave that up to debate for later in this podcast as far as if the Packers are the best team in the league. But that's still a signature win. And also, it was great because Jared Goff had 238 yards on 21 of 30 passing for 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. That is a great game from Goff, and that is all the Lions need him to be. And I'm wondering if this was a really big deal for Jared Goff to understand that that's all Detroit needs from him in quarterback play. They don't need him to be the crazy stat patter that he was when he was with Sean McVay and the Rams. All they need in the NFC North is they just need him to not make mistakes. That's it. He doesn't have to throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. The game that he had against Green Bay is exactly what they need every week. And in the NFC North, that's really all you need. Because the proof is in the pudding that the Lions beat the Packers in that first half. And all the Packers fans that are saying, it doesn't really matter. We didn't play our starters. You guys did play your starters for the first half, and you had 2 starting offensive linemen come back, and one of them is going to be in the Hall of Fame in Bakhtiari. You guys got those guys back, and you still lost to the Lions in that first half when you had your starters in. So I think that speaks volumes about Detroit, and it might speak volumes about the Packers as well, but we're going to go into that later in the podcast. So, in short, point 2, the Lions beat the Packers. What an amazing way to end the season for a team that has fought tooth and nail for their coach every single week. Amazing way to end the year. Now, the final thing. Another prediction that I got wrong. The Jaguars beating the Colts. I was initially really surprised at this. And I loved it because Tennessee is in the AFC South with the Colts. And the Colts were hot on our tails for a few weeks as far as trying to take the division lead. And the Colts dropping one to the Jaguars is one of the funniest things I have seen this entire season. It's amazing. I absolutely love that happened. But I was initially surprised at this, but then as I started to sit back and think, I was like, did I let myself get caught up in the media narrative around the Colts? And the fact that, they're a Super Bowl dark horse. I don't want to play them. I think I let myself get caught up in that. And I think a lot of people got caught up in that narrative because all I had to do to realize that I was caught up in that narrative was look at the Colts' schedule and see that, and this is a hot take, but the Colts are the exact same team as the Denver Broncos with a better coach. That is a really hot take, but I shot it by Ryan, and Ryan straight up agrees with me on this. The Colts were the Denver Broncos, but they have a better head coach. The reason why I say that is because the Colts won 9 games, all right? And they went on that, they had that streak in the middle of the year where people were like, oh, Jonathan Taylor is the MVP, and Carson Wentz is finally playing well, and oh my gosh, this team can take out anybody. But let's stop and think about something for a second. Only 3 of their 9 wins, so 33%, okay? A third of their 9 wins were against winning teams, and I would argue that those 3 wins, which were against the Bills, the Cardinals, and the Patriots, I would argue that those 3 wins were against teams that have had consistency issues all year. The Cardinals are not nearly as good as their record states. So that's not really a quality win, and people will say that, almost their entire roster was out. Well, guess what? It's obvious that Kyler Murray and that offense are struggling without DeAndre Hopkins. They did not have DeAndre Hopkins for that game. I don't think it's nearly as quality of a win as people try to give them credit for. And then the Bills have had consistency issues, and a team like the Colts that just plays really basic sound football is exactly the type of team that can make the Bills stumble, which they did. And then the Patriots, Mac Jones had a bad game. Okay. If Mac Jones has a good game, I think the Colts beat the Patriots. No, I think the Patriots beat the Colts in that week. So after I looked at it, I realized that, you know what, actually, the Colts deserve what they got. They really did. Their record is indicative of who they actually are. It is a team with a good running game, Denver, and a quarterback that has the ability to not lose a game, Teddy Bridgewater, Denver, but also has the ability to lose a game, Teddy Bridgewater, Denver, and then has a pretty good defense that can keep them in games. That is literally the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos have gotten raked over the coals all year long for their approach to games, when in reality the Colts were doing the exact same thing. It just looked different because of the narrative that was getting spun around them. But yeah, they lost to the Jaguars and got themselves eliminated from the playoffs because they lost. Once they lost to the Jaguars, they could not get into the playoffs at that point. It was over. Because the Steelers won. Once the Steelers won, that was it for the Colts. And they got what they deserved. They really should have gone down there and taken care of business. That is an inexcusable loss. But anyways, makes me happy as a Titans fan. Now, those were three big things about the previous week. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump in to playoff predictions. Now, I did get my seedings wrong as far as what I predicted was going to happen, and that's fine. I was pretty close. But we're going to go ahead and go over the slate of games we have for Super Wild Card Weekend after I chug some coffee. This is my first day with caffeinated coffee since I got sick. Because when I get sick, I take it pretty seriously, and I really try to watch putting anything in my body just to try and help with my recovery. And caffeine is a diuretic. It dries your body out. You don't want to do that. You want to keep it hydrated. So, first day with caffeinated coffee, and it is glorious. But the first game that we're going to go over with the playoffs is the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I am so happy that the Raiders won that game. I'm so happy. I couldn't stay up for all of it. I fell asleep because of how late it was. But I watched the first half, and I went to bed going, yeah, I think the Raiders are going to win this game. Justin Herbert tried his darndest to will that team into the playoffs, but the Raiders were not having it. So, previewing this game, it's interesting. And I feel like previewing the entirety of the AFC is really tough because the AFC has been so unpredictable this year. But let's stop for a second and congratulate the Raiders on making it into the playoffs this year. The Raiders are a team that scream tenure and maturity because they have been faced with so many things this year that teams really never have to deal with that are going to the playoffs. And this is a really big deal for a team going into the playoffs because if you have mental maturity and you have tenacity, that will carry you in the playoffs in the NFL. Because if you want it more than the other team, football is a sport that matters. Why do you think the New England Patriots were so successful for so long? Because those players wanted it more. I don't give Tom Brady hardly any credit for the Patriots' success, but the rest of the team around him, I will give them credit because there were some really, really gutsy players on his teams. And the Raiders kind of remind me of that. Derek Carr is one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks in the league. He's one of those guys that you kind of have to watch to understand how good he is. His numbers don't really say it, but that man has put his team in position to succeed time and time and time again in his career. He's never been in a good scenario with that team. The best team that he had was the year that he was an MVP candidate. And then he suffered the injury and the playoffs happened. They had to start Connor Cook and they lost, I think, to the Texans. But Derek Carr finally has the opportunity to be successful with the Raiders in the playoffs. And I really hope that he does. And I honestly think that the Bengals are going to get more than they bargained for with this game. The Bengals offense is going to have to be clicking from the get-go. Like, they're going to have to be firing on all cylinders from the start. Because if the Raiders keep this game close and it comes down to who wants it more and who is more mature on both sides of the ball, that's going to be the Raiders. Almost completely because of Derek Carr, but also because of their head coach. Their head coach, I have no idea how to pronounce his last name, like Baskia or something like that. He is a very tenured coach. This is his first time being a head coach, but he's been around football for decades. The man knows the game. And Cincinnati is a young team, and even though they're extremely talented, when it comes to the playoffs, tenure matters. And I think if Las Vegas can keep this game close, they'll win. So I actually think, and I need to double check this, but yeah, so in my official pick, I have Cincinnati winning the game. But don't be surprised if the Raiders steal this one. This season has been chaos. Don't be surprised if it continues. Up next, we have the Patriots and the Bills. I won't keep you guys on the edge of your seat for my prediction on this. I think the Bills are going to win. I think the Bills may have figured out how to keep Mac Jones from making a difference, which when the Patriots win this year, it has been because Mac Jones plays above his current level. He doesn't play like a rookie. And again, it's okay that Mac Jones makes rookie mistakes. That's very okay. But the Bills, I think, finally figured out that the way you beat the Patriots with Mac Jones is you make him play like a rookie, because aside from that, the Patriots really don't have much of an offense to speak of. Like, their run game is okay, but in order for the Patriots to be successful, Mac Jones has to be successful. And I think the Bills figured that out. And they split the season series. New England won in Buffalo. Buffalo won in New England. This game is in Buffalo, but I don't think it's going to matter as much because the game in Buffalo previously had wind gusts of like 50 miles an hour and nobody could throw the ball. This game is going to be extremely cold, but the passing game will be a factor this time. And I think the key here for the Bills is Josh Allen has to produce. He has got to produce from the start, because if they can put New England in a hole at the start of the game and make Mac Jones have to play hero ball and make him prove himself, Buffalo has the advantage because Josh Allen has the ability to use his legs or his arm. He's refining his game to the point where he knows which one he needs to be using in order to win a game. And I think a perfect example is the game last week against the Jets, when Josh Allen had a play that I think really, really just puts in frame how much of a physical freak the man is, because he was running out to his right towards the sideline. He was going to get tackled, and any other quarterback aside from maybe Aaron Rodgers, I think, throws the ball away, or they try to make this pass and it gets picked off. But Josh Allen, literally at the last second, as he is about to get pushed out of bounds and he is getting hit, he manages to sidearm the ball on a rope. I mean, this thing seriously was sent as straight as you can imagine. And the fact that he did this when he did this while getting hit and pushed out of bounds is insane to me. But he sends a ball on a rope, I think about 20 yards downfield. It wasn't a super long pass, but still, throwing a ball as straight as he did, as far as he did while he's getting hit, was phenomenal. And it goes straight to a receiver for a touchdown to break open the scoring in that game against the Jets. It's things like that that make me pick Buffalo against New England, because Josh Allen has that ability and Mac Jones does not. He just doesn't. And Josh Allen has matured so much over the past 2 seasons compared to what happened when he played Houston, when he pretty much lost the Bills the game in those playoffs. I just think that Josh Allen is the key here. And I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down to 1 or 2 key plays that break it open for Buffalo, and then Buffalo pulls away once those key plays happen. For New England to have a chance, they need to force, I think, at least 2 turnovers in this game so that Mac Jones doesn't have as much pressure on him. But if they don't get 2 key turnovers, then I don't see a way that New England wins that game. I'm going to grab a drink real quick, guys. Now, up next, we have a game that is very, very difficult for me to pick. It's kind of like the Las Vegas-Cincinnati game. The Steelers versus the Chiefs. I'm a Chiefs fan, but this game makes me nervous. Ben Roethlisberger was interviewed, and he thinks that they don't have a prayer against the Chiefs, which, I mean, according to common sense, they don't have a prayer against the Chiefs. The Steelers' offense has been anemic all year long. They honestly shouldn't be in the postseason at all. It frustrates me that they are, because a team like the Chargers or the Colts are better than the Steelers. They just are. And they're not in the playoffs, but the Steelers are. It's baffling. Get rid of ties. Seriously, NFL, just get rid of them, because they caused this to happen this year. Get rid of ties. But Ben just wants to go out there and have fun. He knows it's his last ride. The team knows it's his last ride, and it's a surprise that he gets to go to the playoffs in his last year. Now, that makes me nervous, because the Steelers have some really good young talent. And when you tell good young talent, just go out there, screw it, have fun, sometimes that leads to them having historic games. Okay? And against a team like the Chiefs, whose defense has been very, very questionable against some questionable offenses this year, like the Denver game, that offense should not have scored as much as it did against the Chiefs. So I'm scared about the Steelers abusing the middle passing game, which Ben can do. Ben has been doing dinking and dunking all year long, and he knows how to exploit weaknesses in defenses. He might not have the arm to threaten deep anymore, but he does have the arm to take advantage of what the defense gives him. And unfortunately, Kansas City has been giving a lot to defenses, especially against Denver. Like, I just could not fathom what was going on in that game. And Kansas City's defense is not as good as everybody says it is. It's just not. They played weak teams. That's why their defense looks better than it is. But I'm scared for the Chiefs in this game. That defense has got to protect the middle. That is where they are getting their butts kicked. Now, in Kansas City's defense, they don't have to worry about a scrambling quarterback with Ben like they did with Drew Lock. Drew Lock really hurt Kansas City with his legs. But Pittsburgh has the personnel to punish Kansas City with the run game with Najee Harris. He is a much better running scenario than Denver. Melvin Gordon is good, but I don't think that it's in the same league as the Steelers' run game is. For the Steelers to win this game, they have got to keep an eye on Travis Kelce and Byron Pringle. Byron Pringle has actually been one of the most reliable receivers for Kansas City this year, and defenses lose him all the time, which is interesting because that's usually what happens with Travis Kelce. And you got to wonder, how in the world does that happen? But the thing is, defenses focus so much on trying to keep Kansas City from getting those deep plays that they're willing to let the small routes go. They're willing to sacrifice that. But the thing is that Byron Pringle has evolved into enough of a playmaker that when he gets the ball, he's getting yards after the catch at this point. And he's also getting yards after contact because Byron Pringle was actually a Kansas State Wildcat, which that's my favorite college. So I've watched him since he was in college. And Byron has always been an extremely physical wide receiver. The dude makes catches that he just should not make. And I think Kansas City fans who have been watching him this year would agree with that statement. He's got a bit of a problem with dropping open passes, but when it's a pass that you're like, oh, there's no way he's going to catch that, somehow he does, and then he punches the other guy in the mouth on his way down to the ground. Like, he's a physical guy. And I think Mahomes is starting to rely on him more. So Kansas City really needs to try and utilize Kelce and Pringle. If they do that, then I think they'll be okay. But if they don't take what Pittsburgh gives them, Pittsburgh will stay in this game, and you do not want Pittsburgh to stay close in a game down to the wire. Kansas City has issues with winning really, really close games, so don't give Pittsburgh the chance. I'll go ahead and say that I am picking the Chiefs to win this game. I think their weapons will pull through in the end, and a big play from Kelce or Pringle will be the decider here, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with the Chiefs. Eagles-Bucks. I'm picking the Eagles to upset the Buccaneers here. And the only reason I say that is because this season has been flubbernucked. It has been chaos so much this year. And the Buccaneers have shown some distressing signs, okay? They struggle against teams that just play basic football, and that's it. Like teams like Washington. They lost to Washington. Teams like the Saints, they dropped both games to the Saints this year. They almost lost to the Jets. Like teams that only play very, very basic football, they struggle against. It's almost like they overcomplicate things. And yes, Tom Brady has had an amazing season. Oh man, give him the MVP. Don't give him the MVP because he needs to have a season like that when he's with Bruce Arians and has all the weapons he has. He darn well better have a good season like that. But the Eagles are the ultimate question mark in these playoffs because with Pittsburgh, we know Pittsburgh is bad and does not belong here. We know that. The Eagles, on the other hand, yeah, some of their wins have come against weak teams. That's true. But the flashes of brilliance that they have shown are instances where you can look at them and go, yeah, you know what? I think that they do deserve to be here. I think they do deserve to be in the playoffs. And the thing is that they clinched their spot last week. They didn't clinch their spot this week against Dallas, which they lost, but they didn't have to beat Dallas to get in. They clinched it beforehand. So in my mind, that puts them ahead of teams in the AFC because they actually managed to clinch a spot early. But they're the ultimate question mark. They're the joker in these playoffs. And because of that, I'm actually going to pick them for the upset here. I would not be surprised if they actually manage to pick off Tom Brady a couple of times, and that is the difference maker here. Jalen Hurts is going to have to play the game of his life. He's going to have to run for his life against that defensive front, but they might be able to take advantage of how much the Buccaneers like to blitz. They might be able to take advantage of that and get Jalen Hurts out of the pocket, let the pocket collapse and go past Jalen, and then let him get into open field, and that might be how they get third downs a lot of the time in this game. They might just let Jalen run, and honestly, that's what they should do, because the most productive Jalen ever was when he was at Oklahoma, and he was pretty much allowed to do what he wanted with the plays. Oh, sorry for the interruption, guys. I got a text. I'm expecting somebody at the apartment here soon. It's actually my dad, but that's why I checked. Sorry about that, guys. But I really, really won't be surprised if the Eagles do it, and they are my pick. They're my pick to beat the Buccaneers. I won't be surprised if the Buccaneers win, but I'm picking the Eagles. Now, up next, Niners versus the Cowboys. I'm picking the San Francisco 49ers here. They play clean football, and when they don't have nasty turnovers, they tend to win. And I'm trying to find a team that reminds me of the 49ers, and I think the closest one that I can think of is they are a not as weaponized version of the Tennessee Titans. That's the best way to put the Niners, in my opinion, because when Garoppolo plays clean football, they win, and they look pretty good when they do it. They beat teams that they really shouldn't beat. And that defense is a little opportunistic for my liking, but they play some physical ball, and I really appreciate watching it. I have the Niners beating the Cowboys. Oh, and here comes my dad, so I need to pause. I'll be right back, guys. Okay, and we're back. Sorry about that, guys. My dad just dropped off some stuff for me, and he also brought me a mocha, which I'm really excited about, and I'll get to in a second. I'll get to you later. That sounds a little creeperish. I probably shouldn't have done that. Anyways, Niners Cowboys. They play clean football. Defense is a little opportunistic, and as long as Jimmy doesn't make mistakes, they have shots in games. Dallas has been so inconsistent lately, and I know that they throttled the Eagles last week. Yeah, that's great. They should have throttled the Eagles. You definitely should beat a wild card team that is barely above 500 and didn't have most of its starters. Yeah, good job, Dallas. You did that. Fantastic. I am not convinced on Dallas. I haven't been all year. They remind me, I said this last week, they remind me a lot of the Green Bay Packers during the more recent years when Mike McCarthy was there, where they had amazing regular seasons, but then they get to the playoffs and they drop it, they lose because they go up against a team that had a good game plan and they don't adjust for that confrontation. Like, they just don't. That strikes me as Dallas, and I have the Niners winning this game because I think that the 49ers are able to overcome difficulties during games and they can adjust their game planning, like in-game, but Dallas does not strike me as that. And them losing to Arizona before they beat the Eagles, to me, is proof of that. Wow, a lot of people are texting me now. Sorry about that, guys. But I I don't like the Cowboys. I'll be transparent about that. I hate the Cowboys. But I love Dak Prescott as a person, and I think he's a pretty good quarterback too. But I really think that the Niners are going to beat the Cowboys. I've got the upset. So that's 2 upsets in the NFC that I'm calling. Up next, we have the Cardinals versus the Rams. Now, I couldn't really make a pick on this one, so I asked my dad to provide the pick for this, and I'm just going to go ahead and read his text. So I asked him, what the pick is and some reasons for it. Here's what he said. Let's see. I am not enough in touch for a real pick, but I will give you 2 scenarios. 1, I want Stafford to go a long way since Detroit has a corporate policy concerning not wanting to be in the playoffs. Clearly they don't want to be because they suck every year. Kyler is young and will have many more shots. Advantage Stafford. 2nd, let's do a nature pick. Cardinals are beautiful, but on a day like this, because it's snowing right now, pretty heavy. It's actually really beautiful. But Cardinals are beautiful, but on a day like this, they often rely on other creatures to survive. Without bird feeders and humans, would they survive? What kind of winning attitude is that? I need someone else to provide for me, or I will die. I like that. Rams, on the other hand, live high in the mountains where nothing else can, the cliffs. They search for food, the low temperatures, and snow. If they can't find food, they go higher and search longer in more dangerous places. And what about headbutt fights? Those animals are built to knock somebody out, especially wimpy birds. Advantage Rams. I love his take on this. So I'm going to go with the Rams based off of my dad. But there is another thing that has to do with that game that I'll go into later towards the end of the show. But just know that I am picking the Rams for that matchup. So, with all of that being said, what does that leave the playoffs looking like? Well, in the AFC, that would leave the number 1 overall seed Tennessee Titans hosting the Cincinnati Bengals, and then the Kansas City Chiefs would play host to the Buffalo Bills. Now, I don't know about you, but those are 2 pretty good games. If that's what ends up happening, those are some good divisional round games in the playoffs. And also, that's actually the top 4 seeds in the playoffs as well. So you would automatically get rid of the wild cards, and you only have the division champions, which with the AFC this year, I think that's the way it really needs to be, because the AFC seedings, the way that they are, I think that, the top 4 teams, those are the 4 best teams in the AFC. I think the playoffs definitely got that right this year. Those are the best teams in the AFC. Now, in the NFC, the way that the seedings would shake out with the games that I have predicted is the Green Bay Packers would play host to the spoiler Philadelphia Eagles. Now, again, I know I'm calling for 2 upsets here, but I really do think that it can happen. I think those 2 upsets will happen with Philadelphia beating the Buccaneers and the Niners beating the Cowboys. I think the Niners beating the Cowboys is more realistic than the Eagles beating the Buccaneers, but hey, I'm not going to put it past anybody. But yeah, Green Bay would play host to the Philadelphia Eagles, and then the Rams would play host to the Niners, as we would get back-to-back NFC West games in the playoffs, which is interesting because you might be able to say that top to bottom, the best division in football this year was the NFC West. And I think that's an argument. I'm not sure if it's one you'll win, but it's an argument for sure. It's a good debate. Now, I'll definitely say that between those 2 scenarios, I like the AFC side much more than the NFC. I don't know. I feel like this is probably the only time that I can talk about Green Bay during this episode with the time that we have left. But Green Bay, I'm not sold on Green Bay yet. And I think that the loss to the Lions was very, very telling of deeper issues. I like Aaron Rodgers a lot as a quarterback. I think that he is the best quarterback of my lifetime. And I think that he deserves to be in discussion for the greatest, skills-wise, the greatest quarterback in the league's history. But, man, I am not convinced on the Packers yet. It's like the Cardinals. But I will definitely be paying closer attention to the AFC side of things in these playoffs than the NFC, because the NFC, I don't care. There really aren't any narratives to pay attention to, and I won't be surprised if the NFL just tries to carry Tom Brady into the Super Bowl like they always do. So I'll definitely be paying more attention to the AFC than the NFC here. Also, I have two of my favorite teams are in the playoffs on the AFC side, so of course I'm going to be paying more attention to them anyways. Now, in closing, I want to talk about something real quick. And I'm not a casual football fan. I mean, I have a podcast, and I talk about game planning and strategy in this podcast. But this is something that the media has been portraying and shoving down the throats of every NFL fan, and a lot of casual fans have bought into it. Even more serious fans have bought into it. I don't buy it. And the idea that the AFC was a poop show this year. And I agree with that to a point, because the reason why I'm bringing this up is because everyone keeps going, how in the world did Tennessee become the number one overall seed in the playoffs this year? Well, in the AFC this year. How did they do that? They're not that good. It's like, well, I don't know about you, but I think a team that fielded 91 players on their roster this year because of health and safety protocols and injuries, I think a team that did that and lost their best player, and arguably, he is one of the best players in the league, Derrick Henry. He's the best running back in the league. If it wasn't for the fact that he got injured, he probably would be in the MVP conversation. The only reason Jonathan Taylor was getting all the notoriety that he was because Derrick Henry got hurt, okay? Derrick Henry was leading the NFL in yards before he got injured, and it took Jonathan Taylor, I think, 3 games to catch Derrick Henry in regards to yardage. That's how good Derrick Henry is, okay? So when you're talking about a team that faced the adversity that they faced, and they still managed to take the number 1 overall seed in the conference, that is a huge accomplishment. And nobody is talking about the fact that the reason why Tennessee is the number 1 overall seed is because they absolutely embarrassed the Kansas City Chiefs earlier in the season. The Titans beat the Chiefs so bad that the Chiefs had to have an epiphany after the game and went on an 8-game win streak. Almost nobody is talking about that. The last loss that the Chiefs had before they lost to the Bengals this year was the Titans, when they got thrashed. I watched that game. It was an embarrassment to the Chiefs. Like, seriously. The Titans are my favorite team, but I was watching that game and just going, this is embarrassing. This is really, really embarrassing. And I think it was actually the wake-up call for the Chiefs, because they got smashed in that game. So whenever I hear people making excuses about the AFC just being a crapshoot this year, I'm like, hold on a second. This is kind of illegitimizing what Tennessee pulled off this year. And even though I'm a Titans fan, I really feel like people need to have a bit of a reality check and go, they still went 12-5. They still won their division. And they literally had to roster the most players in the league because of how hard they got hit by health and safety and injuries. That is an accomplishment, okay? And also, here's the other thing. The number 2 seed, the Chiefs, are also 12-5. I don't understand where that narrative is coming out of. Yes, did the AFC have a lot of bad teams this year? They totally did. But so did the NFC. Are we not going to talk about the Panthers, or the Giants, or the Seahawks, or the Bears, or the Lions, or the Saints? Like, are we not going to talk about that? I think it is such a stupid narrative that just tries to, lower the positive impact that the Titans had this year. Because it's not one of the flashy teams, everyone's like, well, then the AFC sucks. No, they don't. The Titans are a much better team than people think. And I personally think that the evil empire of the Patriots didn't die. It just got a new identity with the Tennessee Titans because Mike Vrabel is Bill Belichick 2.0. He has managed to out-Belichick twice. And he manages to beat teams the same way that the Patriots did for 2 decades. He does the same thing, all right? So I think people need to get used to the Titans being the new empire of the NFL. And I personally love it. I love it. Even though I hated the Patriots dynasty, I will love if it continues under the guise of the Titans. Now, another closing point. These are some really interesting playoffs. There are very weird scenarios for how teams got in here. And there were some historic games. And I just very briefly want to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay? Because Ben Roethlisberger has not been very good for 2 years. Okay? He really should have retired last year. He shouldn't have come back this year. But he decided to. And I think that what we really need to look at is we need to take the same approach to the playoffs that Ben Roethlisberger is. He just wants to go out there and have fun. And I think as fans, we need to do that as well because this is one of the most uncanny seasons we've ever had in regards to records and division winners and certain games. Like, I mean, I don't even need to talk about the Steelers-Lions tie. That's all I have to say in regards to weird games. But I think as fans, we really just need to take a page out of Roethlisberger's book. This dude is staring down the barrel of the end of his career. And he's okay. He's totally okay with it. He's okay with losing against Kansas City. He's just along for the ride. And I think as fans, we just need to be along for the ride too. Embrace the suck. Okay? Embrace the suck. That's going to be my motto for these NFL playoffs. And I know that, I host a podcast and it's my job on this podcast to make predictions and discuss what's going on and bring facts to the discussion. But at the end of the day, I'm a fan too. And I'm going to enjoy this as a football fan. I'm going to enjoy these playoffs. I can't wait. The first game kicks off at 3:30 today. I think it's the Bengals. I think that's who plays first. And I can't wait for the kickoff, honestly. And if I'm wrong with these predictions, then hey, I'm wrong with these predictions. But it's been an amazing season, and I think it's going to be a great offseason. As long as we don't get New England, Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl, I'm good. That's really all I care about. Now, the last thing I want to talk about kind of has to do with Brian Flores, but it also kind of doesn't. So Brian Flores got fired. And, narratives have come out explaining why he got fired and this and that and the other thing, which that's all well and good. But the league thought he was safe. Seriously. I mean, that caught everyone off guard. There's somebody else that I think is in the same boat as Brian Flores, and some people are talking about it, some people aren't. And I want to talk about it right here, right now, very quickly. Cliff Kingsbury. If the Cardinals lose to the Rams in a way that is similar to how the Broncos lost to the Chiefs this last week, I think Cliff Kingsbury might be on his way out of Arizona. Because this is the most talented roster Arizona has fielded in a long time. Long time. They have talent on both sides of the ball. Kyler Murray is an extremely productive quarterback. He doesn't make mistakes very often. They lost DeAndre Hopkins. I get that, but you can't pin that. You can't pin the season on that, okay? If one guy going out ruins your entire season, you need to reevaluate your team. The proof is the Tennessee Titans. That is all the proof that you need that you can overcome something like that. Cliff Kingsbury never should have even been an NFL head coach. I'll just put that out there. I was shocked when he got the job at Arizona because he got fired from Texas Tech, and then somehow he's the head coach in the NFL? What? That made no sense to me. I thought that was one of the stupidest hires I've ever heard of. And ever since Kingsbury got into the NFL, it has been the exact same thing that plagued him at Texas Tech, which is boneheaded coaching decisions, poor defenses, and risk it for the biscuit does not always work, especially in the NFL. That is just how Cliff Kingsbury coaches. They have stupid penalties all the time that are absolutely coaching discipline mistakes. Okay, like jumping off sides, false starts, defensive holding issues. Like, those are coaching things. You could coach that out of teams. Why do you think the Patriots have been penalized so minimally for so long? Now, there definitely were times they should have been. But the Patriots on defense play very, very disciplined ball because that's Bill Belichick's side of the ball. That's what he does. Cliff Kingsbury does not do that with his teams. And I think if the Cardinals lose the game very close to the Rams, like a one-possession game that they can win, and they lose to the Rams, I think Cliff Kingsbury might be on his way out because the guy is beginning to dissipate with Cliff Kingsbury. But it's beginning to go away. And deservedly so. I never want someone to lose their job because that's serious, okay? These are people's lives that we're talking about. But the idea that Cliff Kingsbury is this fantastic head coach, he never has been. He got his butt thumped in the Big 12 year in and year out when he was in college. And honestly, if you want to see what I'm talking about, where making mental errors and just, not having good foundational football, go look at every time that Kansas State played Texas Tech while Cliff Kingsbury was the head coach, because K-State just plays clean football, okay? That's all K-State tries to do. Play clean football, make fewer mistakes than the other team, and take your shots where you can. That's how Kansas State won for decades. And every time Texas Tech played Kansas State, that's why they lost. I don't know any other way. I don't know any other way to put it. I feel like that is the best example that I can give you guys as far as why Cliff Kingsbury has already hit his ceiling with the Cardinals. They will not win a Super Bowl with him. I don't think they're going to advance in the playoffs with him. And like I said, I'm not calling for anybody's job because I don't want to do that. As a human being, I don't ever want to say fire somebody because that's somebody's livelihood, okay? But I think that Cliff Kingsbury does need to be an offensive coordinator in the NFL somewhere. I think he'd be fine at that because I do think that he's too good of an offensive coordinator to be stuck in college, but he's not good enough to be a head coach in the NFL. But that is week 2 of the Actually Sports podcast. I am your host, Griffin. Thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to bringing Ryan on next week when we start talking about offseason. We're going to recap the Super Wildcard weekend. We'll look forward to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, and we'll probably start talking about some basketball topics as well. I'm just waiting for Ryan to really, widen up the show to its, full potential. But he will be on next week. And again, thank you guys for watching, and let's look forward to an amazing Super Wildcard weekend. Bye, guys.